hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay.
Welcome to the Dark Ascent podcast, where we help you become the god of your reality. This is episode 26. Will you be a god or a slave? To learn more about our work, please visit darkascent.org. Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. I am Melektoth, and I'm here as always with my wife Elinara.
Hello. If I weren't here, then he'd be missing half.
I would be missing half, that's true.
Yes.
So today we are talking about a bit of a different subject, I think.
Different but cool.
Yeah, and this is something that I've just been thinking about recently, that some realizations have been taking place and things like that.
When do they not take place?
That is true. Well, I go through cycles, like I've said before, where I have a period of realizations and growth, and then a period of plateau, and then a period of realizations. And so now I think it's starting up again, finally. It was a little bit stagnant there for a while. But essentially, what we're talking about is actually the very thing that Dark Ascent is named after. Basically, the difference between light and dark, and whether you will be a god, and what that looks like. So, just to give some background to this, I was writing my Circle of Darkness newsletter. Hint, hint, if you want to check it out, you can go to darkascent.org/circle.
It's very late this month.
It is very late this month, but you know what? I have to go with the inspiration.
That's right.
But I was writing the newsletter, which is about freedom this month, and why freedom is one of the most important things to being a god of your reality. And as I was writing, I was about to write that it's the destiny of every soul to be a god of their reality. And then I sort of had one of those moments where I stopped and I sort of sat there and thought, wait a second, is that actually true, or am I just saying that?
And then you asked me.
And then I asked Elinara.
Which is the wrong person to ask.
I know.
By the way.
A little bit, but you're a good sounding board. So I stopped and just thought about it and thought, is that actually true? I don't know. It's just, I like to believe that people have power. I know that people do have power. They can have power. Sometimes it's locked off to them for a time because they just don't know how to access it. But people have power. So I would like to think that everyone will eventually use that power, right? But is that actually true? So I really thought about this and talked to my own personal deities about this. The deities I work with, or the beings I work with, I guess. And the conclusion I came to was, no, that's not true, actually, at all. And in fact, most people will not take that path. So when I renamed what used to be co-creation coaching into what it is now, Dark Ascent, I was operating on the same premise, albeit maybe a little more unconsciously. I wasn't aware of everything that I'm aware of now. And I was talking about the right-hand path, the left-hand path, and light and dark. And if you look at the first few episodes of the Dark Ascent podcast, you'll see that discussed quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And over time, I sort of focused more on balance, because I do believe that you need a balance of light and dark. And so I thought, well, if that's true, then you probably also need a balance of, right hand and left hand and things like that. And so it's sort of a both and sort of thing. And it's true that both paths complement one another in a lot of ways. And I thought it would be important to sort of be in the middle of that. But what I've realized with this is that while it is important to have a balance of light and dark, there's no middle path when it comes to, I don't really have a better term than right-hand path and left-hand path. And I'll define those in just a second. But there's not really a middle path, because the end goals of both of those paths are totally at odds. You can't go down the middle. You just can't. It's utterly impossible because the end goals of both paths are totally different. So eventually you have to choose. And what I realized was that most people, most souls, maybe not in this lifetime, maybe not in the next, but eventually, most souls will choose the path of light, let's call it, the right-hand path. And very, very few will choose the path of darkness, which is the left-hand path. And I'll explain why that is a little bit. What exactly do I mean by these paths? Since I started Dark Ascent, especially over the last few months, my goal has been, as I say in the intro, to help you become the god of your reality. That's sort of when I realized that piece of things, it sort of pinged for me. It was like that clicking into place that I needed. Like, yeah, that's my purpose. That's my purpose, to help people to become the gods of their reality. And I think people don't always know exactly what that means or don't get what the importance of that is. And so I want to express that a little bit. But that's my purpose. That's what I'm here to do. And I realized that. Now, obviously, a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people don't want that for whatever reason. That's fine. But my specific purpose is to help those who want more, who want to become the gods of their reality, to do so. And it's about a lot more than just how do I manifest. Yes, I talk about the law of attraction and things like that, how to manifest your desires and so on and so forth. But being a god is about a lot more than just how do you manifest this one desire. It's a lot more than that. It's about how do you take control of life.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
It's really taking control of everything.
Exactly. It's how do I rule over my personal universe? How do I move beyond all influence? How am I unmoved by any part of life? How do I become my own center of gravity, so to speak? How do I do that? That's what being a god is. That is self-deification, which is the central tenet on the left-hand path. So let me just describe a little bit what I mean by these two paths. And I've talked about this before, but it's been a while. I've sort of veered away from this topic a little bit over the last several months, but I want a little bit of a refresher here. Most people follow the right-hand path. Whether knowingly or not knowingly, they follow the right-hand path. Almost all religions are on the right-hand path, and they, say that they're of the light, which they are. That doesn't mean they're good necessarily, but the right-hand path is predominantly the path of light. That doesn't mean there's no darkness on it. There's darkness. There's light and dark everywhere.
Yeah.
But the right-hand path is predominantly the path of light. And so you find on this path pretty much all religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, much of the New Age community, much of paganism, even pretty much any religion you can think of, right, is going to be on the right-hand path, because most people are talking about serving the light and being selfless and self-sacrifice and living a good life and living according to morality or whatever. And that's just what they do, right? And especially now with the New Age community, you have people calling themselves light workers, which I kind of
Makes
cringe.
me cringe. Oh my god.
And that kind of thing.
What about Darkworkers? Were they?
Yeah, actually, I have a post about that. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah, that was a long time.
Yeah,
when was that?
It was, earlier this year. I don't remember. I'll link to it in the show notes, though, because I thought it was a good one.
I forgot.
Yeah. So these religions and these spiritual paths are of the light. They're on the right-hand path. And the question is, what is the common denominator? What really holds them together? What are they really about? And what they are really about at the core of things is the diminishment of the self, of the ego. So you have that in a few different ways. For example, in Buddhism, they totally deny the self. They call it anatta, which is no self. Okay, so they say the self does not exist. The self is an illusion. The ego is an illusion. And that all that exists is nothing, basically void. right? You have in Hinduism something similar, but not quite the same. It's basically that what you really are is the all, that you are part of the consciousness of God, or they call it Brahman, and that's what you are, right?
Isn't there a name for it? Moksha?
Moksha is like enlightenment.
Moksha, yeah.
Same as kind of nirvana in Buddhism. But you are not a separate self. You are basically in the consciousness of God, of the all, and that's what you are. So that you have no separate existence, no separate freedom or anything like that. And enlightenment is realizing that. And then in the Western religions, Christianity and Islam and Judaism and so on and so forth, that looks more like, the best word I can think of it is enslavement to something higher, to God, basically. Because when you look at it, let's say in Christianity, for example, because that's what I'm most familiar with, you're supposed to live a good life. You're supposed to live according to God's laws. You're supposed to do what God says to do, not do what he says not to do. You're supposed to obey God. And essentially, if you do all that correctly, then you get to go to heaven and, I guess, worship God forever, which sounds kind of boring. It's about reducing yourself. It's about eliminating what do I want. It's even like not my will, but thy will, that kind of thing.
It makes me cringe.
And
always did.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what really it's all about. It's about not what I want, but what does God want? And if there's a conflict, then it doesn't matter what I want. It matters what God wants. It's not that they're saying there's no self, although some of the mystics do say that.
Yep.
But it's more that you're enslaving yourself to God because you're giving up your free will to God's will. So all of these religions have the same end goal, which is the diminishment of the self, of the ego, to such an extent that you dissolve into the all, into God, into the divine, that you are subsumed into that totality, right? That's the end goal with nirvana or moksha or enlightenment. We talk about the ego death. You're literally dissolving into the all or into nothingness in the case of Buddhism. Or in Christianity, you have like the beatific vision where all you see is God and there's nothing of yourself left. And that is what their end goal is. So you're reducing yourself until there's nothing left and that all there is God. So most people will agree with that. Most people, whether they know it or not, whether they're conscious of it or not, are following that path. They may not be so conscious or deliberate about that, but most people think that God is higher than themselves and that they should do what God wants of them, and so on and so forth, right? That is the path of light.
It really is like an enslavement.
It is.
And it's not even, necessarily as much the doctrine. I mean, it is there, but I've heard of priests that have said, you're focusing too much on what God's will is and not what yours is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it is man dictating that too.
Well, I mean, these religions are created by man.
Yes.
So.
But it's, man saying, this is what God wants of me. And it's like they kind of make it up.
The whole thing is made up.
Yeah.
That's just how it is,
Yeah.
If you look at any part of these religions, they are basically causing you to sacrifice yourself, right? Yeah. I mean, if you look at, I gave the example in my newsletter, actually, and I'll give it here too, because I think it's really apt. In the Bible, in Genesis, there's a story of the Tower of Babel.
I don't know how you pronounce it, Babel or Babel.
Well, we're saying it Babel.
Yeah.
The Tower of Babel. And the story there is basically that, the city came together and they built this tower that they wanted to reach to the heavens, right?
Reach to heaven.
Well, it's in the story, it says to the heavens, I believe.
Okay.
Anyway. And so God sees that and basically says, if man can do this, then nothing is impossible to them. Now you would think, oh, that's cool. Humanity is powerful. We have a lot of talent. We are smart. Nothing's impossible to us. That's cool. But no, God says nothing is impossible to them. I must go down and destroy this tower and confuse their languages so that they can't do this. Right? So God literally sabotaged, according to the Bible, sabotaged the best efforts of mankind because he felt threatened.
And if God feels threatened, then he's not really God.
Right.
Because he
come on, what kind of God is this? Seriously, people don't think about this. What kind of God is this? And people never ask that question. They just think, oh, they were prideful and arrogant. Oh, really? Come on. Look at how many things we have today. I mean, we have lots of virtual examples of the Tower of Babel today. I mean, look at computers and look at all the different technology we have today that is an example of man's ingenuity, basically.
Never mind that. The skyscrapers?
Well, yes, literally.
Yes!
But I'm thinking more
the Empire
metaphorically.
State... No, I know, but the Empire State Building?
Yes.
Why didn't God take that down?
Right, exactly.
That's how you know that a lot of these stories in the Old Testament, well, really, probably all of them were fake.
Obviously.
And we were even taught that in school.
Right.
In religious school.
But no one thinks about, why is God threatened?
Yeah.
Why is God insecure? Because mankind can do this really awesome feat. Oh, well, they're not going to need God anymore. And that's... Right, God is afraid of that, sort of. And so he comes down, and the story goes that that's where multiple languages come from, because he confuses their language, and they can't communicate with each other anymore, and so they can't cooperate and collaborate.
Though someone could still build a tower.
Yeah, it's a story.
I know, but I'm just saying it was a bad one.
So the point is, in the Bible itself, God is threatened by the technological advances of mankind and tries to sabotage it.
Yep.
Now, what kind of God is that, right? I mean, that's just stupid. But that is what I mean about enslavement, because you're not supposed to reach great heights on your own. You are supposed to pretty much be nothing and just live through God, or just live through God's will or whatever. And that's it, right? And if you try to do something on your own, then, according to the Bible, God doesn't like that.
Yep.
That's not good. So I think that's a perfect example of why this is really an example of enslavement, because if you're on the right-hand path, if you're on the path of light, you are beholden to some higher law, some higher being who's saying this is what you do or this is what you don't do. And even if it's not Christianity, even if it's, like I said, Hinduism or Buddhism or something like that, you're not allowed to have desires. You have to, like a lot of these spiritual teachers will say, you have to accept reality as it is. And I say that too. But the difference is they say, accept reality as it is, have no desire to change it, because that's just resisting it and you'll suffer. And whatever reality is perfect, and you shouldn't want to make it any different than it is, right? So it's basically stripping your free will away because, well, that's suffering, right? So it's a form of enslavement. And yes, I know, I mean, people can choose this path and it's a valid path, but it does reduce your ego, yourself, and really strip away your free will. So that's the right-hand path. The left-hand path is exactly the opposite, pretty much. So on the left-hand path, I call it the path of darkness. And on this path, the goal is your own ascension to godhood, basically, your own self-deification. And that just means, well, it means whatever you want it to mean, really, but it just means that instead of you giving the power to someone else, or you reducing or diminishing yourself, you are strengthening yourself, your ego, the positive form of the ego at least, and ruling over your own personal universe. You're giving yourself the power. You're not giving it to someone else or something else, and you're not giving it up. Right. So you're not trying to reach some form of enlightenment where you're merging into the all. Like I said, on the right-hand path, the end goal is union into the all. No matter what religion or spiritual path, that is the goal, union into the all. But on the left-hand path, it's the opposite. It's that you are trying to become your own being, your own eternal being of sorts. God is eternal, obviously. And so you're trying to become your own eternal God who rules over your own reality, not the whole entire universe, you're just your own slice of it, so to speak, your own personal universe, because that's all you really have control over. That's all anyone has control over, is their own personal universe. But you are taking on power. You are choosing to take on power, to be free, to rule over your own reality, and no one else can say otherwise. And so that's what it is to follow the path of darkness, the left-hand path. And a lot of people are frightened by that because they think that it is an affront to God or it's selfish, which it literally is selfish. That's the very meaning of it. But that it's somehow evil or bad or whatever. So it
scared me at first, too.
Yeah.
I hated it at first.
Yeah. It can be scary. But there's nothing inherently bad about it. Light does not mean good. I've said this a million times in the past. Light does not mean good. Darkness does not mean evil. It's just terms. And it just signifies different things. So on the left-hand path, all you're doing is, instead of focusing on the other, instead of focusing on God or on the universe or outside of yourself, you're focusing on yourself as the center of things. You're strengthening your own being so that you can be a separate individual from the all. You're preventing that dissolution into the all, into the universe, into God, or whatever you want to call it.
Now, that doesn't mean you don't use deities to help you.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I don't mean use them, but...
Yeah, work with them.
Right. Because they help with a lot of things.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a partnership. It's not submitting to them. That's the difference.
Right. On the left-hand path, there is no higher being, higher force than yourself, basically. But you can ally yourself. Like, worship is a bad word on the left-hand path. You don't worship anyone, right? But you can ally yourself. That's the word I like to use, is you can ally yourself with different beings. And I've talked about that before. But you can ally yourself with different beings and work with them, and they can help you, and they will help you generally.
Is leaving offerings the same thing as worship?
No, not at all. So if you leave an offering to a being, it's just a gift.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you give a gift to a friend, it doesn't mean you're worshiping them or thinking that they're greater than you, or it's just an exchange.
I see the deities as beings that specialize in different things to help, just like people do.
Right, exactly.
So it's great to ally with them. Mm-hmm. Not that it has anything to do with this podcast, but it kind of does.
Yeah, no, it's good though. I believe everyone, I'm not going to say should, but it's helpful because really in my own life, things didn't really start changing until I started working with different deities. Right?
That was the turnaround. Nothing else.
That was the turning point, yeah.
And I can attest to it because I've known him for 10 years.
Yes. That was the turning point. Before that, it was just all stagnant. And then when I started working with these beings, things turned around. So ideally, and I don't want to go deep into this topic because it's not really on topic for this podcast, as Elinara said, but ideally, you would work with at least one male and one female being, a god and a goddess, or it doesn't have to be gods, literally, some type of being, but one masculine, one feminine as a sort of balance.
Yep.
Because there is balance, despite me saying you have to choose one path or the other. That doesn't mean there's not balance in other ways.
Exactly.
Okay, so, even on the left-hand path, there is still light. We still use it. We just use it as a tool rather than allowing it to use us to basically enslave us to its own purposes. Right?
Exactly.
We are using it. We've turned things on its head. and use it for our aims instead of the other way around. So the question is, will you be a god or will you be a slave? And again, I know that when I wrote this as an email a little while ago, Elinara kind of said, like, isn't it a valid choice for people to make? Like, you're making it sound like it's always bad and whatnot. And I know I could put it in a much nicer way. I'm choosing not to. Yes, you can choose the path of enlightenment, the path of light, and all that kind of nice, fluffy sounding stuff if you choose to. But to me, I can't really think of a better word than enslavement for what that leads to. Now, will it lead to a cessation of suffering? Yes. Will it lead to greater happiness? Very likely. Not always, but very likely. There are people for whom it does sort of mess them up a little bit.
Oh, really?
Well,
Enlightened people? Well,
no, there are people who kind of get stuck and become apathetic and aimless, as I was for a while before.
yeah, that happened to you.
This is really why I turned to the left-hand path, because on the right-hand path, I became very aimless. It was like I couldn't want anything. So why try to do anything, right?
And I kind of wonder if it's psychologically not the healthiest.
It very well may be. And, there are people who are happy on it. But it just depends. Will it lead to the end of suffering? Yes, it definitely can. But it will also lead to eliminating your power. It will lead to reducing your free will, eliminating your free will. Because, again, if, as these spiritual teachers say, if reality is perfect as it is, what's the purpose of your free will? Why have free will if you need to make no decisions, if reality is as it is, and you shouldn't want to change that? So in that case, there's no purpose for free will. There's no purpose for desire. Everything is as it is. Any desire to change that is inherently not of the light, right? So that's why this path tries to train that out of you and say, well, it's God's will, not your will. The ego just leads to suffering. So you can't change things. You shouldn't want to change things. So to me, that's enslavement. You're enslaved to either some higher force, so-called, or to the all, or to the universe, or whatever, because you're giving up your own free will, right? That's what it is. I mean, of course, you have the freedom to choose whatever path you want to, but for me, that's what I call it, enslavement, because that's what you're doing. So that's the right-hand path. And the left-hand path is the path of godhood. Do you want to be powerful? Do you want to be your own being, your own God, basically, no one higher than you? And this really goes as far as you want it to. I've really realized over the past months that there is no limit to this, right? There's no morality. Now, some people would scoff at this, but in my opinion, there's no morality on the left-hand path. You are the one who chooses, because morality says someone else, some higher force dictates this is right and this is wrong. Well, there is no higher force. So on the left-hand path, you are the one who chooses. So there is no morality besides what you dictate for yourself. That doesn't mean you have to do what you think to be bad things. It just means that no one else is going to tell you what's right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong except for what you decide to be. And it also means there's no karma that's going to come back and attack you if you do bad things or reward you if you do good things. None of that exists. There was a discussion in a Facebook group we're in recently about the Threefold Law. In Wicca, they have the Threefold Law, which says whatever you do will come back 3 times over.
Well, you did recently say, I don't know if it was on a podcast or on Dark Ascent somewhere, that the Threefold Law was true. So you might want to...
No, I didn't say that exactly. What I said was that, and that was, I think, just to you.
Was it just to me?
Yes, it was. What I said was that it's true that when you send energy out, it's amplified. It's not exactly 3 times, but it is amplified. But that's just sending energy out. The Threefold Law says whatever you do, it focuses on your actions. Whatever you do will come back 3 times over. And that's a scare tactic of sorts. So yes, just like the law of attraction, if I'm focusing on a certain type of energy, whether abundance or lack or love or hate or whatever, that's going to go out and amplify, and I will get that. That's just attraction.
But that doesn't mean if someone hurts you or something that you can't punish them.
Right, that's totally your choice. And so what I'm saying is there's no threefold law in the sense of if I take this action, the action itself is right or wrong, and so it will come back 3 times over and something like that. You could take an action that someone else could see as evil, but you feel good while doing it, and it would not come back as evil. It would not come back as negativity or as harm, right? So you have total control. Obviously, there are higher laws like attraction. I think that's one of the central ones, that whatever you focus on is what you get. But that's just like the law of gravity. Like, no one could change that. I don't care how powerful of a god you are. You can't change the law of gravity.
Oh, come on. I want to fly.
No. It's the same thing with attraction. The law of attraction is essentially that whatever you focus on comes back to you. Not as karma, but in the way of that's what your reality fills up with more of, this thing that you're focusing on. And so, yes, if you're focusing on a certain type of energy, that's what you'll get more of. It'll amplify and come back. But that doesn't mean that if you do something that someone sees as evil, that evil is going to happen to you. It's not like karma or justice or something like that,
Yeah, because whatever that action is might make you feel vindicated.
Right, exactly.
It might make you feel more positive.
Right. So you are the final arbiter of what you do, what you should do or shouldn't do, or anything like that. You get to dictate how you're going to live your life. There is no karma, there is no threefold law that's going to come back and punish you for doing something that someone else thinks is bad. That just isn't going to happen. So it's a huge amount of power that you have at your fingertips, literally, and that's scary for some people. But you get to choose what you do with that. And like I said, it's limitless. You get to choose how you live. You get to choose what happens. You get to choose everything. None of these things, none of these scare tactics that these different religions use to keep people in control are really going to affect you at all, unless you choose to be affected by them for some reason, because subconsciously you believe in them. Then yeah, they can affect you.
Yeah.
But to be a god, it's to train yourself out of all these beliefs, these limiting beliefs, and to take absolute control over your reality and to do exactly and whatever you want to do with that. That's what it is. So it is your decision. Will you be a god or will you be a slave? It is absolutely your decision, and most people will choose to be a slave because they don't know anything else. And darkness is scary to them. Power is scary to them. People would rather no one have power than that they have power. It's an interesting thing, right? We look at people who have power, and a lot of people are afraid of them.
Yeah.
A lot of people say they should not have the power that they have. And people would rather everyone be weak than a few people be strong. But that's not how it works. What do you have if everyone is weak? You have chaos, you have nothing. But if you are strong, if you have power, then you have everything. You have the means to build the life that you want to build. And it's not just in this life. It doesn't stop here. You don't just become a god in this life and it's all erased after death. This is your ascension. This is why I've called it Dark Ascent. This is your ascension to godhood. Right? It's not an easy thing either. It's very hard, and it's something I work with every day to improve myself in that respect.
Well, that's the point here.
Right. You have that absolute control, and once you have ascended to godhood, you're there.
I was gonna say, what happens after that?
That's it. So I will answer that to the best of my knowledge. This is what I believe at the moment. So like I said, each path has a different end goal. Mm-hmm. On the right-hand path, you will be on this earth until you realize the illusory nature of the world and the ego, until you give up all karmic attachments to material things, essentially, until you give up all desire and can simply be content with what is. When you can do that, you are free to move on. You have dissolved into the all, into that which is higher than yourself, than your ego, and you move on. You move on to who knows what. It's really your choice. Probably, in my opinion, the next level, whatever the next level is. It could be another world, another dimension. It could just be hanging out with the divine, or just being a big blob in nothingness.
Oh, don't say that. That's what the all is.
Right. I mean,
oh, yeah, we're on the all. Oh,
yeah,
my God.
That's what I'm saying. So
my brain is fog.
I know. So it's...
Thanks.
Yeah, well, it's your choice. Well, is it really? Because it really takes away your choice. So you will be somewhere, but you move up either to the next level or just totally dissolve into the all, and that's it. Right? But you are no longer a separate individual. That's it. That's the end of the right-hand path. And once you have reached that, then your time on Earth is done.
Well, you didn't die, so that was a good thing.
Yes. Now, on the left-hand path, it's obviously totally different, but it's also kind of similar in some respects. Instead of dissolving all attachments to this world, what you're doing instead is mastering control over this world. And you're still not attached. Attachment is still a negative thing because it's a weakness. Attachment says, I want this and I don't have the power to get it. Right? So attachment is still a negative thing. But on the left-hand path, you master control over your reality, and you basically strengthen your own self until you have that absolute control. You have that absolute freedom. You have that absolute sovereignty over your own personal universe. And when you have mastered your reality to such an extent that you can will something and it happens, and there's no suffering, there's no attachment, there's nothing except whatever I will happens, then you move on to a higher level.
I wonder what that is. We never know.
Again, it's higher dimension, higher plane of existence, who knows. But that's when you leave here. In both paths, you leave here when you've mastered the lessons that this plane has to offer, right? But on the left-hand path, it's when you have mastered control over this reality, this plane of existence. When you have become a god, when you've ascended and have that power and freedom and control over existence. That's what it is. So in some senses it's similar because yes, you have to give up attachments, but on the right-hand path that looks like giving up desire, whereas on the left-hand path that looks like mastering desire and getting whatever it is you want in life, willing it and it being done. Right? Very simply, on the right-hand path, and this is a common saying too, it's thy will be done to God or to whatever is higher. And on the left-hand path, it's my will be done. It's whatever I choose. So that's the end goal. And when you can reach the end goal, then you're free to advance. And that's the way I see it. So again, it's your choice. Will you be a god or will you be a slave? And most people choose the path of light, the path of enslavement to the all, to the universe, to God, or whatever you want to call it. Most people will, because they fear the darkness. They fear power. They fear responsibility. And I've seen this so much. I said earlier, people would rather no one have power, but people would also rather be a victim and complain about, the injustice of life than to take power, to take control and change it. Haven't you noticed that?
Yes, I have. I see it all over Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
And I see where people say, this world is horrible. I'm going through all this stuff, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it's victim blaming or whatever.
Well, it's playing the victim.
Playing the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People would rather play the victim and complain about the injustices of life than they would to take control, to claim their power, and to change things.
I know, it's like, wouldn't you rather change it than sit and complain about it?
Yeah, you'd think.
I don't understand that. Probably because it's more work to take control.
Right, it is.
And people want to take the easy way out and just sit and talk about it and not do anything.
Right.
That's what they call talking the talk.
Right.
Not walking the walk.
Yeah, that's how most people are. And it's scary. It is kind of scary to take control.
Of course.
And to claim that power, but that's the choice that you have. You can either be powerless and hope that the afterlife will bring something better, or hope that you can reach enlightenment or something like that and give up all your desires, or you can take control, claim your power, and have the things that you want, have the life that you want, have full control over your reality. That's your choice. And once you make that choice, the universe will shift to accommodate it. And it does take a choice because, as I said, the end goal of both paths is completely different. So you do have to eventually make a choice. It may not be in this lifetime. It may not be. In general, the default path is the right-hand path because it takes deliberate intention to be on the left-hand path. It takes a certain amount of power to be on the left-hand path. So by default, you'll be following the path of light unless you choose otherwise. But you must choose eventually. You must commit to one or the other eventually. And that's really what I've realized. You must commit. Mm-hmm. And once you do, whether it's in this lifetime, hopefully, right now or in the near future, or whether it's sometime in the far off future in another lifetime or something, once you do commit, the universe will shift to accommodate your new choice, and your path will lead you more and more in that direction. You will receive guidance to advance on that path. You will sometimes be tested on that path, especially on the left-hand path. That can happen quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
But you will advance, you will evolve upon that path. You will receive the resources you need, but you have to commit to one or the other. So the final point is that for the last several months, as I said, I've been sort of wavering on focusing on darkness, and I think it does scare off a lot of people. So you'll see a trend in the podcast, especially if you look at the first 15 or so podcast episodes, they are about more, dark subjects, right? So I didn't really pull any punches there. 16 through 20 became a little more balanced, a little lighter. And then 21 through 25 have been sort of, I'm not going to say watered down. I think they've all been very good, but I haven't really been hitting on darkness very much because
you were afraid of what other people would do.
Exactly. Up until recently, I've sort of waffled about what really is my point here. And to the extent of sometimes thinking, did I name the website correctly? Should it be Dark Ascent? It was sort of named on a whim a little bit.
Isn't that the best, though?
It is. But after this recent realization, it really has caused me to double down on my focus on darkness.
Which is awesome.
Because I've realized that as I said, my goal here is to help you to become the god of your reality. And I don't want to just be another law of attraction teacher who says, this is how to create what you want in life. That's not my goal.
That's too cliche.
I mean, that's part of it, but that's not everything. That is the very foundation, the very essentials of what I have to teach, but it's not everything. Mm-hmm. Because to be a god is not just to create this or that manifestation, to get this relationship or to get that money. I mean, come on. If you knew that you were a god, what would you do? Of course, you'd get the stuff you wanted, whatever. That's obvious. But then what? I mean, I think we have to think bigger. And that's really what I want to point to. So with this realization, I have been, like I said, wavering about focusing on darkness, and especially in the last several episodes, I've sort of cut that out almost entirely. But I think that henceforth, I'm definitely going to focus on a lot more, because to me, the Dark Ascent is exactly what I said. It is the ascent into godhood, which is on the path of darkness. That's the only place to do that. So in the darkness, you're ascending into your own godhood. That is the Dark Ascent. And that is what I mean by that term, in case you were wondering. So darkness is part and parcel of that process. What do you have without darkness if you're trying to become a god? You need that aspect of things. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of the law of attraction, is that with a lot of law of attraction people, it's like they're trying to say they have control over their lives, and they're also trying to remain on the path of light.
Yeah.
They're trying to be all, for the highest good of all.
Oh, that's my favorite.
And so on and so forth. It's like, you have to pick. And then why do you think people aren't successful? You can't. This is a different point, maybe for another day, but you can't take total control over your reality and at the same time say for the highest good of all.
No. That's like saying God's will be done.
Right. It's like, well, if this is not God's will, then let it not be. Well, no, that's stupid. There's no highest good of all. It's either your will or it's not, and it doesn't matter about everyone else. Seriously. That's how it is. So that's why most law of attraction people are weakened and aren't able to create what they want to create. Do you think I ever said for the highest good of all when I created all the financial goals that I had, that I achieved, when I created all the other things I achieved? I never once said for the highest good of all.
Hell no.
That's weakness right there. That's trying to follow a middle path, trying to kind of, sit on the fence between light and dark and say, oh yeah, you can take control, but well, if it's not for the highest good of all, no. Right? So you need to commit to darkness. Without darkness, you have no power on this path. Like I said, light is still used. It's a tool that we use. That's something I can talk about in the future. And I'm talking about this in the newsletter too. But you need the darkness as the foundation of your ascent, thus Dark Ascent, your ascent into godhood. You need that darkness, not to give you that power, but to basically be the medium for that power to come about. Okay?
Yes, I like that.
So this is something I want to explore a lot more deeply in future episodes. And so, yes, I will be focusing more on darkness. Again, not exclusively. There is still light. There's still acceptance. There's still effortlessness. There's still all of that stuff. But you need the will. You need the power innate, present within darkness in order to advance. And so I think I'm doing you a disservice if I'm not focusing on darkness a lot more than I have been. So that is what I plan on doing. So I know that was quite a bit.
Yeah.
But hopefully that makes sense. I hope that it helps you to understand what I mean by light and dark, by right-hand path, left-hand path, by becoming a god. What exactly does that mean? Hopefully that's a little clearer after today. And my main purpose is, number one, for you to make a choice to commit to one path or the other. And number two, just to give you a notice that, hey, from now on, you're going to see a lot more darkness because that's in the name. It's going to come up. It's going to be present. It has to be. And that's what we'll be talking about in the future. So hopefully that makes sense for you. Like I said, I'll be discussing this a lot more in the Circle of Darkness in the 7th issue of that newsletter. So if you want to check that out, go to darkascent.org/circle.
And we're a cool community, so join us.
Yeah, it's definitely, we have a good Facebook group community going on. People are very helpful. We talk about our experiences and things like that. And so it's a pretty neat community, I think. It's still growing, but it's been pretty awesome. So definitely check that out. And if you want to see the show notes for this podcast, you can go to darkascent.org/DA026. So with that, I know we had a little bit of a hiatus. We skipped 2 weeks ago. We were on vacation, and it was a little lethargic after coming back.
Yeah.
So
It was time. They needed a break.
But we will be here in 2 weeks from now with another episode of the Dark Ascent podcast. With that, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.